Hello and welcome back to SIGGRAPH Spotlight. I'm Dawn Fidrick, SIGGRAPH's 2025 Computer Animation Festival Director. Outside of SIGGRAPH, I'm in production through and through. My work spans across animation, VFX, live theatrical performance, primarily in New York and Los Angeles. I've stage managed the legendary Blue Man Group, contributed as a visual effects artist to blockbuster films like Star Trek and Iron Man. My debut independent film feature, Other Madnesses, was recognized by The Hollywood Reporter, and my dream project in the sci-fi world is producing the planetarium show Signs of Life at Griffith Observatory. And currently, I am the production team manager at the powerhouse global VFX company DNEG in Vancouver. All of this, from stage to set to studio, gives me a deep knowledge of production, CG, animation pipelines, and ultimately has led me to my role here at SIGGRAPH. Most of all, I strive to cultivate a sense of purpose, meaning, and belonging, which in turn makes a more creative environment in which is reflected in all the projects on the screen. This now brings us to a very creative and innovative space that is SIGGRAPH, in particular SIGGRAPH's Computer Animation Festival, which is an Academy Award qualifying festival for the Best in Show award winner in the short film category. It is widely recognized for its groundbreaking contributions from artists, researchers, and innovators around the world. So without further ado, today I'm thrilled to be joined on this podcast with an incredible group of past, present, and future Computer Animation Festival directors. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in just a moment. But today for the podcast, we'll be discussing what makes this festival such a standout part of the SIGGRAPH community year over year. We're going to go behind the scenes into the submission process, share insights about who we are, what we do as CAF directors, how we build our subcommittee teams, select reviewers and jurors, and even share some of the scoring criteria which informs the selections that are made. Before we start our conversation, I'd like to welcome our guests and have them share a little bit about their background and how they came to be a CAF director. To start, John, as our most recent 2024 SIGGRAPH Denver, Colorado Electronic Theater Director, please introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you very much, Dawn, for having us here. As Dawn said, my name is Cheung, and it was an exciting opportunity to represent the program in 2024. Prior to that engagement, I was production sessions chair for SIGGRAPH 2021. And it's an interesting opportunity to be able to take all your passions that you grew up with, all your love of film, love of animation, visual effects, and finally turn that into a wonderful, unexpected opportunity to represent the community. And by way of volunteering at various stages throughout my career, I felt that I would be doing some jury work or kind of more day-to-day operations type of volunteering. However, that opportunity turned into, do you want to chair a program? And that belief that the community had and the conference chairs had over the years in your abilities to not only put together an amazing team, but truly find your own vision and engage that vision. It was one of the most exciting opportunities for both SIGGRAPH 2021 and once again in SIGGRAPH 2024. For my regular day-to-day activities, I was a former head of CG at a animation studio, advertising-based animation studio in New York called Hornet. And prior to that, for 9 years, I was a senior technical director at Blue Sky Studios. So I've tipped both ends of the scale, from freelance, high-paced commercial work to long-form film and features and everything in between. So, and also very excited to be part of this amazing group that's assembled here today.
Thank you, John. So thrilling. Big shoes to follow from 2024, as well as big shoes to follow from 2023. Kalina, please share with our guests.
My CAF journey started as a juror in 2021. I have a background in scientific data visualization, so I was invited to be on that jury as the subject matter expert for that category. And I guess I did an okay job, because I was then invited to be the 2023 CAF director 2 years later. So my rise to the CAF position was rather quick, but I did have a long history of being a SIGGRAPH submitter and volunteer in the SIGGRAPH organization prior to that. And a computer animation festival is inclusive of all types of computer graphics, even though perhaps it's most well known for the short animated films. But I was thrilled to be in this position of CAF director as a representative for the sciences. So in my professional work, I primarily work on science documentary films for, education and for entertainment. I make things that have been in museums, and basically I try to make science look cool, get people excited about galaxies and tornadoes and molecular structures and kind of, using 3D graphics for science and for good. So yeah, I was really thrilled to bring a taste of that to my year as CAF director through a pre-show that I developed that was also scientific. So had such a great experience and happy to chat more about it with you all.
Wonderful. It's incredible to have your source data be the universe. And also Tim, who is the 2025 Asia CAF director.
Hi everyone, I'm Tim Cheung. My journey with SIGGRAPH started as a student volunteer, I believe in '93. It was a first time, going to SIGGRAPH, and then in '95 and '97, I had my short films in the Computer Animation Festival, fortunately, and was able to kind of enter the industry through that opportunity of being kind of exposed through, SIGGRAPH. And so in '95, I joined a company called Pacific Data Images and was there until they became DreamWorks Animation and worked on films such as Ants, Shrek 1, 2, and 3, and I was head of animation at DreamWorks. And in '07, I returned back to Hong Kong, back to Asia, and started working with another studio called Imaji Animation Studio, and we did another film there called Astro Boy. And I started working with the Asian side of of the industry. And since then, I've been developing my own teams here doing animation in Asia. And finally, I've been able to come full circle and work with SIGGRAPH again in Asia. And I just attended the Tokyo one in 2024, which was a great success. And now 2025 will be happening in Hong Kong, which is my home. And I'm very, very excited and ready to kind of learn from all the people here.
Wonderful. So glad that we can cross the globe and have you on this podcast as well to share with our listeners the Asia conference. And Marina, 2026 CAF chair.
Coming to you from the future, it feels like. I want to begin by acknowledging that I am speaking to you from the ancestral, traditional, and ceded territories of the Coquitlam First Nation, and I thank them for sharing these beautiful lands with me. As Dawn mentioned, my name is Marina Antunes, and I'm the CAF chair for the 2026 festival. And my background is actually not on the technical side. I don't make films. Never have. It has never been my passion. My passion has always been consuming the entertainment in whatever form it comes in. I am since 2014, I've been the festival director for Spark Animation, which is Canada's second largest animation festival and the largest celebration of animation in Western Canada. So I came on board in 2014 to make the festival less of a curated event and more of a competition festival. And that became a true thing in 2019 when we became Oscar accredited, which was a really, really, really amazing feat of magic. It feels like it was a lot of heavy lifting. But so my background is actually in the critical side of film. I was a film writer and I still talk about film on various podcasts, have for a long time. And that's kind of where I come from to this on the not the making of, but the watching of the animation.
Thank you. And Marina is a fantastic community builder in the local Vancouver area as well as beyond. So it is thrilling that you'll be succeeding the position as well. Great. Now that we all have a bit of an introduction, I thought we might start for our listeners to talk about how we considered our vision for the festival and coming into your year, whether it's past already or will be in the future, or myself here in the present. I'll share my vision for the 2025 Computer Animation Festival, and I'd love to hear or have you share how you thought about your vision or what you might be thinking and how to contribute your insight to the core of the festival. So thinking about this for myself, we've mentioned a couple of times the electronic theater or the CAF, and I think this maybe some of our listeners, which is it? Is it the electronic theater? Is it CAF? Is it Computer Animation Festival? We hear this, but I just want to kind of clear that up a bit and give some context, because over the many years that the festival or the electronic theater has been part of SIGGRAPH, it's had some different incarnations. And what I really sought to do here in the present in 2025 was bring back the umbrella of the Computer Animation Festival. And inside of that is the electronic theater, and it is the animation theater, and it is any special film event that we have. It is the festival included in all of those things. And I think some of my colleagues might be able to give some history of how the conference may have been set up in the past, where production sessions were part of the festival and then they broke off into their own program. I think in Asia, it is a bit different, where the production sessions are still part of the Computer Animation Festival. So maybe not to get caught too much in the weeds, but the vision that I'm hoping to bring this year is to bring us back to the festival of celebration of film with subset of programs underneath that festival, being the electronic theater, the animation theater, which John brought back in 2024. And then I want to announce it, but it may be too early, a special film event, which will be an anniversary film. It will be the 30th anniversary film of a feature that you all know. You could probably count back 30 years and guess which one it is. But yes, there is a wanting to preserve the core program, but I think we all want to bring a little of our background and insight into the year in which we lead the festival. So perhaps I'll let whomever is ready to jump in to share their vision from previous or future.
We're not all going to jump in and talk at the same time.
Yeah, I
I
call on you.
Well, to be honest, I haven't given this a whole lot of thought as of yet because it feels like I've just started. But I think having sort of sat in with you, Dawn, on sort of your journey so far, I feel like I want to build on what you've continued from John. This idea, this concept of the CAF being sort of this all-encompassing film kind of celebration or celebration of animation in all of its forms, and have that sort of be like the placeholder for everything else that's inside. So this idea of having the big show, the electronic theater, and then having these lunchtime events and perhaps other film related events around that as well. I think that move is really welcome. I like the fact that it feels more like a film festival, I guess. And I'd love to sort of build on that. How I'm gonna build on that, I'm not sure yet. Maybe ask me again in 6 months. But
Yeah.
having sort of been following your journey so far, I feel like that's the right direction to go, and that's kind of where I want to continue to focus.
Amazing. I think being able to tap into our listeners who might be interested, what does that mean for them? Maybe there's a first look of something they want to explore as a sneak peek as a film event. Maybe, a studio or an individual might be interested to contact one of us and say, hey, they have something upcoming for 2026 for Marina, or maybe this year, and it might make for a innovative session in which we can hold that in the animation theater space.
I'll jump in to say, and everything that Marina said there is very much applicable out of the playbook that I had following Kalina's fantastic execution. But as a relatively new volunteer to the organization, but somewhat of a long time attendee, and knowing the history of this conference and what it is meant for not only our particular communities and sectors of various industry, but just on a global level of the impact that SIGGRAPH has in its 50 plus years, I should say. It's not resting on laurels to simply do what has been done in the past, either successfully or areas that potentially could seek a little bit of improvement and tweaking to maximize that return. But it's what drives us all as a community, as creators. We have similar interests. We have varying ways on how we execute those visions. But it's, in my humble opinion, what would I want to see as an attendee coming in, either for the first time, that I would want to come back and see again, potentially something different. And I think that's been some of the magical moments for me at SIGGRAPH, regardless of CAF or other programs, is it is truly this. You cannot measure the value of what it provides, whether it be an amazing pre-show or cultivating some of the most amazing animation works in all areas of research, narrative, film, and so forth. So I kind of approached it in a similar way, Marina, which it felt a little overwhelming watching all of this develop in real time and thinking, how am I going to be able to apply my own take? Not necessarily that you have to exceed your predecessor, but what would I want to see? I had that moment, I think it was in LA for SIGGRAPH 2023. I had this aha moment just waking up at 4:00 in the morning. And it sounds really, scripted, but it really felt like I got hit by a thunderbolt and the vision was kind of there. Now, ultimately, was that the same vision that was translated into actual execution in Denver the following year? No. But the inspiration and the kind of spark, to coin a term, that spark was ignited in that moment. And I think that, this is a fantastic way for us chairs to discuss our points of inspiration, but to also relay that to the generations who are to come. And I feel very humbled, not only being in part of this company of amazing individuals, but those who have done this position as well, to be considered and to hopefully have received some positive regard after the show was over. Yes, Dawn and Tim and Marina, there is a point where you're going to feel like the show is over and you can start building those accolades, and it's fantastic. But it's that recognition in a way, and that maybe is my selfish way of thinking, but they appreciated the work that we did so much that they came up and gave us a compliment. So that in and of itself is justification. But certainly the amazing, whether you do a pre-show or not, or you hype the whole thing up, or you make a big festival out of it or not, the substance of the show is really pulling together the most amazing works that are out there, these creators who are striving for excellence, be it students or professionals or independents or what have you, and just having that opportunity to share their visions out to a group of thousands of people. You can't put a value on that.
And you really open that up by expanding the animation theater to bring more content in. And you've mentioned something that I want to touch on with Kalina's year of 2023, the pre-show, which was my entry into the CAF by being the pre-show lead. And so, Kalina, if you could tell us about what your vision was in 2023 and how that really ignited the celebratory feeling again, I think that maybe led John and myself down this path.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So 2023 was just kind of a year after the virtual conferences were happening post-COVID. So the pre-show had kind of died down over the last few years before that. The pre-show had always been a thing, going back decades. There had generally been a kind of, introduction event before the CAF to get people excited, but it kind of was in a little bit of a lull before my year. And I kind of decided that I did want to put a lot more effort into the pre-show and, make it something really cool and big and flashy again. And, like I mentioned, with my background being in scientific visualization, I did think that was an opportunity to bring, science into the conference. So my vision was originally just that, how do I bring science to the pre-show? And my favorite scientific domain is astronomy. And I had worked on some planetarium shows in the past, so kind of started thinking in that area. And I knew Dawn through us being volunteers on the Women of SIGGRAPH Conversations Committee, and I knew that she also had experience in planetariums. So I invited her to work with me on that, as well as some other people. And we just started collaboratively building this idea, which turned into this kind of really cool interactive flight through the universe I think people really enjoyed it. I certainly did. It was a lot of fun to work on. And it was great to bring the pre-show back. And then the next couple of years, 24 with John, possibly 25 with Don. We will see. Might continue some of the pre-show traditions that I had started. The other thing that was part of my vision was maybe a little bit obvious. It was the 50th SIGGRAPH conference. So I didn't need to think too much about the fact that, I wanted to do something special around that as well. A lot of the other programs were also focusing on, the history of SIGGRAPH, looking back as well as looking forward to the next 50 years. So even though in my year, we did still call it the Electronic Theater rather than the Computer Animation Festival, I think I did take kind of the first steps to bring the festival back. I did have a second part of the program that was a retrospective event that was a screening of clips from the most seminal works from the last 50 years of SIGGRAPH, as well as a panel of people that were discussing the work. So it was more than just the Electronic Theater, but I hadn't quite conceptualized the idea of bringing back the whole festival. So I'm really glad that that is happening now. So it all kind of builds on itself from year to year.
On its own, like took on something of its own, knowing it was the 50th and the retrospective, and then it just seemed natural to keep expanding that. Tim, tell us about on the Asia side of the conference. It's structured a bit different than here in North America.
It is. I want to actually talk a little bit also about my kind of vision for CAF Asia. It's been a while since I've kind of actually attended SIGGRAPH over the years, since since the early days. But attending the Tokyo one was quite exciting and kind of brought back a lot of the memories of me attending it for the first time, and made me start to think about, what kind of vision I should have for, the Computer Animation Festival. Hong Kong is an interesting city. It's kind of a gateway to China. And, China in the past 10, 20 years, even now, is still a bit of a wild, wild west for computer animation. But I would say the last decade, computer animation, the industry in China has actually really sprung up. And, I think this year there was a film named Naza, which is a sequel. It actually had a box office record of reaching $1 billion in its own market. And, that is quite a significant milestone for animation in Asia, especially in China. And, that's something that I've always haven't really quite seen too many studios from China attend SIGGRAPH and be in the kind of international side of things for the industry. And, one thing I'd love to try to do is to, since being back in Asia and having worked in China with some of these studios, wanting to bring some of these studios to SIGGRAPH in Hong Kong, SIGGRAPH Asia, and have them kind of introduce their side of the industry and, get them more involved, because there are some giants being created in China right now for the industry. And, I think there will be a lot of technical and also artistic things that can be shared with the international community. And so one of my visions is really to somehow get a lot of these Chinese studios out to Hong Kong and getting more involved, also maybe in the North American ones in the future as well.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you've brought this up because, innovation is happening everywhere. It's not just at the usual suspects, right? That we think the tools are in the hands of more people today than really ever before. And so it sounds like we have a shared vision to invite other communities that may not typically had been part of SIGGRAPH in the past and come into the community and share their work, whether it is the Indigenous First Nation peoples of the unceded territory that we are on. Bring your work to SIGGRAPH, submit. It is free. There is no entry fee, and we welcome and want to see what others are doing. Like in China, what you were saying, Tim, maybe individuals are not aware of the conference and that there is space for everyone. With this, submissions is sort of the next topic I want to touch on, right? How do you submit? Is it hard to submit? We've just said it's free to submit. This is a process that we've all worked pretty hard on the back end to do. And many of our talent and filmmakers out there might be most familiar with some standard platforms like Film Freeway, things of this nature. SIGGRAPH uses a platform called Linklings, and it is the submission portal in which we direct you to submit. So I want to maybe talk a little bit about the process of submitting, but maybe we ought to start with what can you submit? We accept shorts. And so the shorts are 10 minutes or under in a variety of categories. I'll sort of list them and then ask all of you to comment. Maybe you want to comment your favorite category or which ones you hope folks will submit to. We accept entries in advertisement, that's commission branded shorts, feature episodic and visual effects. It can be a trailer, a clip, a breakdown reel of any live action, feature film, or episodic. Feature and episodic animations. So again, it can be a trailer, a clip, or a breakdown reel to show us the inner workings of an animated feature or episodic. Our most popular, as I think was mentioned earlier, short films, which is an original short film animated. Cinematics, it may be a selection from a larger work, such as a game presented as a short. And real-time graphics, which would be a short film or selection of a larger work that's showcasing graphics that are used in real-time rendering. Scientific and data visualization, there's two ways you can enter this category. One is the data-driven visualization or the conceptual animation, and simulations, which utilizes the mathematical description or model for real system to form the computer imagery that represents a dynamic response of one system of a behavior of another. So there are a variety of categories. All of these categories will be programmed into the electronic theater, the animation theater as part of the festival. But I'd love to hear where you guys feel like you want to see more of one category versus another, or if you have some insight of some favorites or advice for folks who are submitting to one category over another.
I'll speak a little bit about the categories. Oftentimes, people do ask questions about, does this fit into this category or that category? Because it's kind of in between. And it doesn't necessarily matter to, like, if you're between two categories, you can kind of just pick one. And if it turns out that it's, not the appropriate one, it's not going to be a deal breaker or a problem. Things might be recategorized, later if that seems more appropriate, but don't fret about not necessarily knowing which category is the perfect one for you. One other piece of advice or just kind of requirement that I want to highlight is that the CAF really only considers standard horizontal video formats. So we have had submissions in the past of vertical videos or like immersive 360 fisheye videos. Unfortunately, those are not eligible for the CAF, so be aware of that when you are submitting.
Yeah, and to follow a thought there, certainly of all of the categories, we do accept subset work. So if it's one of our requirements currently is the 10-minute maximum run length, and then you have a 7-second trailer to window to present your credits. As I say trailer, I apologize. Credit window. To that point, if the work itself is longer than the 10 minutes, we certainly can accept a subset or shortened, excerpt. However, I think for the benefit of showcasing your best work, it behooves our creators to, unless it's exceptional work in progress, to generally take the tone of, if it's not fully ready and there's a mixture of, some rough comp work or incomplete animation, but 90% of it looks prepared and ready to go, it may be a little jarring. So not to say that the jurors aren't sensitive to those things, but we want to make sure that we're presenting the premier content from around the globe. And sometimes in the interest of getting things out the door sooner rather than later, some work that may not be finished is presented. So that's just some recommendation of, there's always the following year, or there's always SIGGRAPH Asia, so you're not out of the loop, but also meeting with the criteria that the work has to be completed right after the entry requirement has to be completed after the last SIGGRAPH conference, electronic theater, or computer animation festival has screened. So it can't be, you have that period of time that you're eligible to submit to, depending on your completion date of your project.
That is right. And the rules, terms, and eligibility are on the website. That is s2025.siggraph.org. You can navigate to the Computer Animation Festival program. We'll post this link in the podcast description. And the submission window is really the 19th of March, 2024 to the 18th of March, 2025. So that is when your film needed to have been completed. And as John has said, yes, you've also got SIGGRAPH Asia. The requirement, you don't need to live in one region to submit to another. So it is open. Whatever region you live in around the globe, you can submit to either conference. There's not a restriction.
Except I think there's one thing with the SIGGRAPH Asia. I don't think for the Academy, it's part of the acceptance qualifier.
Yeah. So this is a really good point, and we might want to touch on this in regards to what the qualifier means, right? So I was able to distinguish that the North American SIGGRAPH is an Academy Award qualifier for the Best in Show award winner in the category of short film. And to Tim's point, in SIGGRAPH Asia, it is not an Academy qualifier. Perhaps in the future that may change, but as of this year, that is the status. And there are requirements of eligibility with the Academy that your film, if awarded the Best in Show in the short film category, would need to also meet. And those are on the website as well. But it's an exciting way to consider, hey, this could be my track. Maybe if I get into SIGGRAPH PAF, the Computer Animation Festival, and if you are to win that Best in Show short film category award, then you may be eligible to move on to win an Oscar.
To that point, I just want to also add that one of the things that I think is always really exciting about these kinds of events and these kinds of festivals is that getting your film submitted also gets it in front of eyeballs that are really, really important for your career as a filmmaker, as a creative, as, somebody in the field of animation and visual effects. I mean, the caliber of the preview team, the triage team, and the jury is super, super high. These are all people that are experts in their fields. And I think if nothing else, the very fact that you've submitted your project and are in the process and it's free to submit, super important to mention, free to submit.
Ding, ding, ding.
Exactly. That's such a huge deal. And if you're a creative that's entered film festivals, that is a super rare thing. And film festivals can be super expensive. So the fact that you can submit your project to be considered in a festival of this caliber, to be seen, not just by these people that are going to be seeing your films, should it be selected, but even just like previewing it is a kind of a huge deal.
Indeed. And so we want to talk about this a little bit. Who are the reviewers? Who is the jury? How does this review process work? So currently for 2025, we have, and in previous years and for future years, there is a triage review pool of people, as Marina said, who are experts in their field. They've been selected by the CAF director, by us as this group, to serve as a volunteer, as we are all volunteers for the nonprofit organization, to review the films and that are submitted. We have at minimum 3 reviewers per film, hopefully more if there is time and allotment, but at a minimum to diversify the insight of each person, and they will review and then recommend to the jury. There's a comments that they can add to their review, and there's a scoring criteria. So I'd like to also talk about that scoring criteria so that you guys, your listeners, as submitters, as filmmakers, as the talent that we're hoping to see your great and meaningful work, what are we looking for? Yes, please.
Yes. As we kind of go into the scoring criteria, talking about the story, creative, technical, and innovation, just want to add one thing to the submission thing that we were talking about. One thing that, as a jury for the 2024 SIGGRAPH in Tokyo, one thing that I found that didn't quite help when I was jurying was not having enough information of how the film was created, like what type of software, that kind of stuff, I think does help us as jurors make the right decisions and understand how difficult or what processes were made. Because there are some films I wasn't even sure if it was done with computer animation, and was it stop motion or something. And I think when you do submit, giving us, the jury, enough information to know and understand how it was created, I think is quite important.
I love that you brought that up, Tim, because the submission form in Linklings is reviewed and labored over by the CAF director every year to make sure that it's not only functioning, that it has and is updated with whatever might be relevant in the coming year. So one thing that I've looked at this year is exactly that section Tim is referring to, the technological and achievement section. And there you have an opportunity as a filmmaker, and we do read this. All of this comes in a packet with your film. So we're not only looking at your film, but we're looking at the packet in which you've written and answered these questions to say, your film was innovative in this way. You used this software, or you used this tool, or in fact, it may look painterly and physical in stop motion, but in fact, here are all the CG elements that were used to make this possible. And that really can make a difference, because SIGGRAPH is looking to showcase innovative work that is breaking the mold and testing different technologies out there. And the only way for us to really know that is for you to share that with us in the submission process. Thank you, Tim, for bringing that up. So then once you've done that, once you've submitted, and it's never easy. So I feel for all the filmmakers out there. I myself have submitted to film festivals, and it is a lot of work to dot all of those I's and cross the T's. So once it gets there, what are we looking for? The triage reviewers and the jury will be scoring in 2025 for 4 categories, or 4 criteria rather. That is story, creative, technical, and innovation. So maybe I can speak to each one of them, and I'd love to invite our guests to comment as well. Story, what we're really looking for in this context is, can I understand the message, the impact that you're conveying as a creative person? It doesn't have to be a linear story. It could be abstract. It could be any story that moves you, that's meaningful, that prompted you to make this work. But am I following you? Am I intrigued by that storytelling? Creative is that style, right? What is the visual style that you're bringing? Is it something I've seen before or I haven't seen before? Where is yourself? Where are you putting yourself and your team into the screen? So really looking at the quality of that creative style and how unique that is to you as a talented person. The technical criteria is really, how is your rendering? What's the quality of your asset characters? Are the weights painted on the underarm of that CG character? Or am I seeing it fold like a straw? Are the feet sliding in the animation, or are they stuck to the ground, right? Like that technical craft that CG requires across the entire pipeline, whether that is the lighting samples or that is the quality of the asset as your source. And then 4th is innovation. We are looking for the most innovative breakthrough work. So what is it that you're doing, whether it's on the technical back end that you're telling us about in the submission, or that we can visually see is quite obvious you have a voice and you're sharing that innovative voice through the visuals in your piece.
I'd like to add that although the criteria is still the same and the jury rates things by the same scales across all submissions, we do have different subject matter experts generally on the jury that cover the spectrum of types of people in computer graphics. And for something like scientific visualization, For example, the way the criteria are applied can be a little bit different. So, taking the storytelling part of the rating, for example, storytelling is still very important in scientific visualization, but of course, it tends to have a different goal. Rather than being for entertainment, it's more often for education. So, the way that you might tell that story would be very different than for, say, a short film. Or in terms of quality, you have to consider that working with real data from the real world introduces a lot of limitations, perhaps limited data resolution or, certain problems with the data. So something that might be a deal breaker for a different type of submission, like say, that polygon over there looks a little low res. For data visualization, you might need to consider the fact that, well, the data is what it is. You can't just add more resolution. So slightly different ways of interpreting that criteria.
And can you talk with us a little bit more, Kalina, about the scientific visualization criteria? Because I think it's really important also to highlight the cinematic way you might tell a story or a scientific way you might tell a story, and how they could merge. Do they need to merge? Is that something that the talent should consider?
Yeah, of course. So in terms of scientific visualization, there still is kind of a wide spectrum of how one might do that. There's kind of more traditional visualization that takes a data set and kind of tries to just visualize it completely, as accurately as possible without any added embellishments. And then there's more cinematic scientific visualization, which is actually my expertise, where you do take a data set and use that as a starting point, but then kind of do add artistic elements to that. Maybe, you do fix some of those data problems or add, an artistic background or context or elements that aren't necessarily data driven. So, you can combine data with art. And then kind of on the far end of the spectrum is more scientific animation, which is also a part of this category that isn't necessarily data driven, but is still created with the insight of scientists, often in collaboration with scientists. So it is still driven by what we know about physics and the world, but is still created by an artist rather than an underlying data set. So that does cover kind of a wide spectrum. And maybe the more animated artistic scientific visualization can be judged a little bit more similarly to traditional animation, but the kind of more hardcore data visualization will have a very different style and look and type of storytelling.
Again, another really good reason to share with us your process, share with us what you're submitting, where it's come from, what your source data is, because like we've said, there are jurors who are selected across all of these categories. So there is representation there to know what we're looking at. But for others who don't come from that industry, they will rely on that description in which you've written to help give context. And in that jury discussion room, that's when that would come out. The people who specialize in that area would speak to it, share with others, and when we'd refer back to that documentation that you've given.
If I can just interject one point, which is knowing that we have such a vast array of types of submitters. We have independent filmmakers, we have students, we have major studios, researchers, so on and so forth. The importance of what we've been seeing in the last number of years is kind of the bulk submission process that's been handled by a distributor per se. So all the topics we're talking about now about providing the most information about the submission still would apply, understanding that it's usually one person or maybe a small group of people submitting on behalf of a larger set, perhaps an entire master's program of a particular school as an example. So understanding there's a lot of volume of submissions that have to be generated, but still it's important there to take that time as those that are being represented by a distributor to supply that information so that it does get passed along and it doesn't just kind of get washed out through the submission process.
Absolutely. Really good point. If, you are a distributor submitting on behalf of many group of people, we would highly suggest sharing with them, the filmmakers, directly that submission form, asking them to complete some of the more intricate information that you may or may not be aware of on behalf of giving us that context when we review it. Okay, I know we haven't too much time yet, but we have other things to cover. So I'm going to move on to the programming stage, right? Okay, so we've got all these amazing films. We have this team of people reviewing and submitting, or reviewing and discussing. How do we make these decisions? And then how do they end up in the subsets which make the festival? So for 2025, our premier flagship showcases the electronic theater. For those of you who have attended SIGGRAPH, attended the electronic theater, it's a 90-minute program. And so that gives us a box to work within, right? We can only have 90 minutes of content. That is part of the reason that we have a maximum length of the actual submission. It is also why we have a criteria of 7 seconds for the credits, because we want to try to include as many beautiful works that we can in that limited time. But how do we curate that? How, as a director, once the jury has put forth their recommendations, do you look at these films and decide which order are they going to play in? Or perhaps they'll go to the animation theater, because that is another venue that plays throughout the conference that can be highlighted. I have thoughts about how I may do this, but I'd love to hear from John and Kalina, who have done this, and just kind of some of the creative insight that you've put forth in curating the order in which they go, and how that comes to be.
Kalina, do you want to talk about the fact that you and I were the only two people laughing after the first two pieces played in 2023?
Yeah, I'll start with that story. So John and I putting together the program after getting the jury recommendations. And, one of the things that I thought was really important to consider was not just the individual pieces that were being shown, but, considering the electronic theater as one cohesive unit. So I had gone and kind of rated the feeling of each piece. Was it sad? Was it happy? Was it funny? Was it, kind of how did that all lay out? And I wanted to make sure that there was kind of a good emotional arc throughout the whole experience. So, didn't want to just have 10 sad pieces all back to back. Wanted to have a little bit of comic relief and kind of, go up and down and have a nice rounded emotional experience for the audience. We did decide to start the electronic theater with a very kind of intense piece. It was actually the first one that was submitted and that the jury reviewed. And, the whole jury was gobsmacked by that piece, just kind of the emotional intensity of it. And when it was the first piece that actually played in front of, thousands of people that first night, people audibly gasped. And John and I turned to each other and high fived. It was just such a strong start. Yeah, that was great.
I love that, coming from your data background as well. I've seen you and John both in previous years have a pretty impressive visual data set in which you're measuring, that happy, sad, comic, melancholy graph. And it's really given me a lot of insight to think about this year.
I should just follow up what Kalina mentioned to say that the second piece after that initial piece was so striking that the second piece everyone thought was going to be this fluffy, cute, and it was quite the opposite. It just kind of turned everything on its head. So it was still us high-fiving amidst everyone looking around like, what is going on here? But one thing to also keep in mind, not just for our efforts as the committees and volunteers that put this program together, but again, we're representing the creators at this pinnacle event with such high regard. It is the premier event of the opening days of the conference, and it's typically held in the evening. So just a lot of logistical considerations people have been going to the conference for 2 days now. They may be coming from different time zones. There are all these factors that go into it. There is a pre-show, and then they're going to sit for 90 minutes plus watching amazing work. So we want to make sure that the flow and the content is commensurate to the energy level. We try to raise the energy level with the pre-show so that people going into it are going to appreciate it and, for no uncertain terms, not fall asleep. Because I certainly do remember, even in my younger years, I have spent a lot of time at SIGGRAPH where I just couldn't stay awake for every single piece. So the flow of all of these combined pieces into this one cohesive showreel is extremely important. And again, with the advent of additional programming with the daytime theater and being able to provide so much more value, I think is ever more important to strike that balance.
Indeed. Marina, you, I think probably of the group of us have had the most years of experience programming a festival. Not SIGGRAPH necessarily, like Spark, as you've said, but I'd love to hear from you in regards to over the years, how you've crafted the programming experience.
I think speaking to both what Kalina and John were talking about, sometimes it's just about a feeling. Like you have in your mind an idea of how a program should play. And it's always really difficult because sometimes there's a lot of great work and you just don't have enough time to showcase it all. It's just the reality of it. You're always going to have more amazing content that you can actually screen. It's just the truth of it. Unfortunately, there's never enough time to showcase all the films and all the work. And for me, it's very much about feeling. Like, how does this feel when you watch it? And, speaking to what John was saying, sometimes, there's other things to consider, like what time is the screening at? Who is your audience? How tired are they? Have they been sitting all day? Like, is this program do you want them to all be short, like really short projects that are only like 3 or 4 minutes long to keep the momentum going? Is a 9-minute short film that's really, hard to watch, is that really the best place for it? So there's a lot of things that go into consideration for that. And I always say to filmmakers, it's never like a personal thing because a lot of the time, like I say, there's a lot of things that I want to program that for whatever reason just don't fit. And it's not speaking to the quality of the piece. It's just logistically, that's not the appropriate place for it. So there's a lot of things that are always playing in the background and a lot of things that are going into consideration. And the quality of the piece is just the first part of it. Beyond that, there's still a lot beyond that. Like once you make that threshold of, yes, this is great, we want to screen this, there's a lot of other things that are in play as well.
It's really important that you brought up this point because, any creative, any talent, filmmaker, artist, scientist, you are putting your blood, your sweat, and your tears into these projects. You're submitting them all around the world. Maybe you're spending a lot of money to do it, except for SIGGRAPH because it's free. And you're waiting so long for that rejection or that selection email. And it is an emotional roller coaster, when that email comes in, if it's an acceptance or a rejection. And that is really difficult. You're being vulnerable. You're putting yourself out there. You're speaking your truth and you're really hoping that it resonates with people. And so I think it's really important to remember, especially either those who have been submitting a long time or people who are just emerging as a talent, to remember that there are all of these other variables at play. And of course, it feels personal, no doubt. However, do not give up. Do not give up. Continue to find where your voice and where your style fits, whether it's at SIGGRAPH, whether it is at another community or conference or film festival. You have a voice, and try not to be discouraged. We all have a folder of rejection letters. I think all of us do. And it is just part of this experience. So never give up. Keep creating. With this, I think we have run out of time for today. I think I have many more questions, but I'd like to end it with maybe giving everyone an opportunity to just ask or to share with us why should people submit? Why should they submit to the CAF? What is it that is your advice either, or what is the reason? Why is it worth their time?
Yeah, I'll start really quick. I'm a living example of, getting films into electronic theater and getting a 30-year career until now in the industry. So, get your films out there, get them seen. There will be a lot of people in the industry looking at your work, and if they love it, you may end up, in a very good place. So I highly encourage it.
Good advice. Good advice. John, tell us Oh, yep, Marina, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, like, adding to what Tim is saying, I think, it doesn't hurt to submit. You've worked, you've made the thing, you've spent all of this time and this effort to make the thing. Put it out there because you never know. And I mean, clearly you believed in it because it's your blood, sweat, and tears and time. So share it with the world. You never know where it'll end up. You might end up like Tim.
Be like Tim. John, have you something to add of it may be the same. It may be.
Yeah, I think I will echo. You did all the hard work, and it is, quite frankly, the community is so open and welcoming that you often think like, oh my God, how am I going to compete against X? And I think that concept alone needs to just be put to the side, because that's kind of your fear response of any work that goes in front of the jurors, even if it doesn't make the main cut, can still offer a lot of value and impress. Like, I've seen amazing work from various, not just SIGGRAPH, but you keep tabs and you look back and like, oh, who was this individual? What did they do? There's these things have memory, they're living things. So just put it out there and the rewards will justifiably present themselves.
I guess the only thing I have to add, I agree with everything that's been said, but this is an opportunity to share your work, not just with kind of traditional film festival, but with people who also specifically love computer graphics and understand computer graphics. And you get to connect with those like-minded people at SIGGRAPH. If your work is accepted, you do get a special ribbon on your badge, and people will want to talk to you. So it's a great opportunity for networking and for basking in the glory after you've already done all of the hard work.
I'm after one of those ribbons. It's going to happen. I don't know how, but it will happen.
This year in Vancouver. I really echo all of these things that you guys have said, especially in the part of attend the conference, submit your work, whether you are accepted or not. These are your people. We are your community. We want to hear the problems that you're having creating your work so that we can help solve them together as a collaboration. We want to hear something new that you discovered that you want to share with others. It is an opportunity for us to be in person, collaborate, celebrate each other's work, and bring the work to new heights. So this is going to be extraordinary. Beautiful British Columbia in the summer. Summertime is incredible in Vancouver. And I want to thank all of my guests, John, Kalina, Marina, and Tim. Thank you for taking the time to share your past and future experiences on the podcast. And we really hope to see everyone submit. March 18th, 2025 is the deadline for the North American SIGGRAPH Conference. If you have questions and you want to contact us directly, you can contact CAF-S 2025 at SIGGRAPH.org. That email goes to myself and the committee, and we would be happy to answer any questions that may have come up as you were listening to the podcast. And thank you. Have a good day.